Well, Brian Cuban, the younger brother of Dallas Mavericks owner and entrepreneur Mark Cuban, says trauma and shame are the gatekeepers to happiness. Through his own journey of overcoming addiction to alcohol, cocaine, and bulimia, he learned that lesson and is committed to helping others learn how to build resilience as he did in order to persevere in the face of life's challenges. In his first book, Shattered Image, he chronicled the 27 years of eating disorders and the impact of body dysmorphia on his mental health. In his second book, The Addicted Lawyer, Tales of the Bar, Booze, Blow, and Redemption, he took a look back at how addiction and other mental health issues destroyed his career as a once successful lawyer and how he redefined his life in recovery and ultimately found redemption. And now, through finding redemption and building resilience, he is a sought after speaker and best selling author with his first novel, The Ambulance Chaser, releasing as the #1 selling debut paperback thriller. And his next novel, a crime thriller called The Body Brokers, is set for release in December of 2024. And since it is Mental Health Awareness Month, Brian is here to talk about not only his road to recovery, but how he's used aspects of his story to become the successful entrepreneur he is today. I am so excited, John, to have Brian with us. We've been waiting for this for a while.
Good
As
to
am
see you
I.
again, Kim.
This is a pretty impressive guest that we have, and I'm really looking forward to learning his struggles and how he overcame them, and then parlayed that into a career as a novelist and speaker. And it's just fascinating. So, and it dovetails on all we've talked about this month regarding mental health, the other
Yep.
guests we've had on the shows.
Yep, definitely. And so, Brian, before we get started, I know I kind of hinted at it before going into this. We've talked quite a number of times. You've been very generous in your time, even donating some of your time to the Global P.A.D. Association to help, talk to and help our patients build resilience. And so, since we have talked quite a few times, what is that one question that I've never asked you, that no one's ever asked you, that I don't know, maybe we shouldn't ask you?
Let me hear you sing.
And no,
I am a closet bad karaoke purveyor.
I love it. What is your go-to karaoke song?
Raindrops keep falling on my head,
I
just like the guy whose feet are too big for his bed. Nothing seems to fit. Those raindrops are falling on my head. They keep falling.
I
Well
love it.
done.
That actually, woohoo! I wish we had some sort of clapping sound effect. Um,
But you know what the interesting thing is I really started to explore singing as a result of trauma in childhood.
really,
Uh, One of the things I talk about in my very first book, Shattered Image, was, I was a heavy bullied kid and very shy. I went to the summer camp and decided to do a talent show with this kid who was very outgoing. And we decided to sing a Beatles song. And we get up on the stage, it's full of kids out there in the audience. He starts singing. I sit there frozen, and all that comes out is croak, croak. And I start crying, and the kids start laughing at me. I bolt off the stage, and I never sung another note. And it was kind of like falling off a horse, right? The trauma, you don't give it, you got to get back on the horse. I never did. And I decided I was going to address that childhood fear and get back on the horse and learn how to sing just for myself.
oh, I love that. And it's interesting that you pick drops keep falling, because in the article that you wrote for our Mental Health Awareness Month journal, you talk about building resilience. And one way to build resilience was actually through getting in the shower and feeling and just visualizing the drops from the shower head, just washing away your concerns, your fears, your stress, and any trauma. And so I just wonder if there's any deeper meaning to you choosing that song.
Uh, sure. I mean, it is a song of resilience. It's a song of building resilience and not letting, the rainy days, keep you down too long and moving forward. So I purposely chose that song.
And
So
your ultimate singing career is going where?
Wherever it decides to go.
Oh, no, no, no. What's your
My
dream?
goal is just to be able to do passable karaoke.
Just passable karaoke. There's no grander ultimate place you'd like to sing?
No, not really, because what's funny about it is learning your own voice and getting comfortable with your own voice and how you sound. Learning how to sing is a long process, and you go on YouTube, you see the learn singing in 30 days and do this and do that. It is not that easy.
No.
It is not that easy. And one of the ways we build resilience is to test our limits, right? You test, you fail, you learn from it, and you move forward from that. The problem with like people go on YouTube and do these prepackaged things is you get comfortable doing the same thing over and over, and you get good with just one narrow strip of vocal exercise, and you never challenge yourself. And the only way to learn how to sing is to croak, is to crack, is to try for notes you can't hit and build that way. And so it's like building resilience.
It's interesting. I have a funny story. I met Gordon Getty from the oil tycoon family, and he's a famous composer. And I was doing a story on him and his entrepreneurial empire out here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I just thought it'd be really fun to just ask him for some tips on singing. I said, "Can you teach me to sing?" And he said, "Okay, just repeat after me." And he said, "La," and I was like, "La." And he said, "No, no, 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 no. La." And I was like, "La." I was constantly off key. And he's like, "Okay, I quit. What can you sing?" And I said, "Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you."
Yeah, but Kim, the interesting thing is that and what I've learned is because I didn't think I could sing, and some people may still my self-deprecation. Some people may still think I can't, but if you can, if you unless if you are not tone deaf, right, and you can learn how to sing.
I think I'm tone deaf.
yeah, but see, how do you know if you're tone deaf or not? I mean, I
There are
think I
tests
know.
you can
I
take.
think
There are
Gordon
tests you
Getty
can take.
tested me.
Everyone thinks they're tone deaf because it becomes a self-fulfilling thing. I can't sing, so I must be tone deaf, right?
Right. Yeah.
So you just start from the beginning. You just
Yeah.
start with vocal exercises. You start figuring out what your uh, early limitations are and start just building it. Singing is really building blocks, building
Yeah.
blocks.
I think that's so true. And everyone does. And you have to find what's your register. And then once you find, it's like meeting people where they are and then guiding them where you want them
Yeah.
to be,
I
right?
mean, I have a low voice, but I can hit some decent high notes. I can do C5, and I couldn't do that when I started. It just takes practice, dedication, and you just repetition.
And coming up right here on the Heart of Innovation, we're going to see how Brian, or maybe hear how Brian is hitting those high notes and overcoming those life's challenges that can have an impact on your mental health. So stay with us.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We are honored to have Brian Cuban on as a guest, lawyer, author, and now karaoke singer. So, Brian, I wanted to. We typically start a show with a moment of inspiration, and as I was looking for a quote to use today, I opened up your book, The Ambulance Chaser, and you have a quote from your dad, and the quote is, "Today is as young as you will ever be. Live like it." I love that quote because every day is a gift and you can't waste a second. But tell me, I imagine your dad was your inspiration, but tell me what this quote means to you and why you put it in the book.
What it means is that honestly, I don't know, especially now I'm 63, you have to take every day and live it like it could be your last, right? Because you don't know if you're going to wake up in the morning. You hope you do. You hope you do, but and just to maximize enjoyment in life, and to find the fun wherever you can. And that's what my dad tried to do. He was very working class. He ran an auto trim shop with his older brother. He was a middle child like me, of three boys. And just he worked and worked and worked for his kids, and didn't have a college education. And but he still managed to find the joy where he could. He was outgoing. He loved his glass of wine. I'll give you a funny story. Back before I went into recovery, after my dad and my mom separated. And so my dad lived across the street from me, and we started going out together. Okay. And so we go into this bar in Dallas, and my dad, at that time, he was in his 70s. We walk in there, he gets his glass of wine, I get whatever. And before you know it, he has all these girls half his age, and he's telling stories, and he's swing dancing, and he's jitterbugging, showing them how to jitterbug out in the dance floor while I'm sitting there, nursing my beer. And he's sweating, and he's just having this great time. And that's how my dad was. He really was just so charismatic. And he came back to it's funny, he comes back to the bar, and the girls come back with him, and he says, "Oh, your dad is so cute," and one goes, "How old is he?" I go, "He's 72." And my dad didn't hear it. And they go back out, and they come back, and my dad goes, "How old you tell him I was?" I said 72, like you are. And he got all mad. He said, "I told him I was 62. I said, "Dad, these are girls are 20 years old. Do you really think they care if you're 72 or 62?
Would it make a difference?
"Come on, Brian, you're busting my rap." That was my dad. He was just a character, and he lived life to enjoy it, and when he could, because he had his struggles. And so I try to do that to the best I can, and that has become much more relevant to me as I've gotten older. And there was a time in my life where that was just impossible. It was just impossible. I mean, at 18 years old, as a freshman at Penn State, I was dealing with 2 eating disorders, bulimia and exercise bulimia. At 21, I was an alcoholic. By 26, I was addicted to cocaine. By 44, my first of 2 trips to a psychiatric facility after a near suicide attempt. 3 failed marriages as a result of drugs and alcohol. I've been arrested. So there weren't all these opportunities as I went through life while trying to practice law as well. Well, I went through life under a fog of depression and drug addiction and alcohol abuse. It wasn't a lot of fun. And so now that I have over 17 years in recovery, I try to use the lessons I learned during that time to maximize every moment and do the things that I find passion in, such as singing.
And part of I think that quote is, that you're the youngest you will be, right, moving forward.
Yeah.
But it's also putting everything else behind you and keep moving forward, keep living ahead versus living a life of regret of what the past was. You are who you are today, because of that. And you built resilience through that. You wouldn't be who you are today.
That's right.
If you wouldn't have been there and done that.
And you bring up an interesting point, because I see all the time on LinkedIn and here and there, your past does not define you. Your past kind of does define you, right? It really does. Now, you don't want to allow your past to become who you are.
Right.
Forward,
Exactly.
But your past does define you. And my past absolutely defines me, and has absolutely made me more resilient, and has given me, in sobriety, a much different outlook on life, especially as I've gotten older.
Brian, how close were you to potentially having your life extinguished by your addiction?
It was close, doctor. It was very close. In the summer of 2005, I really got to the point where I just saw a black hole in my future. I saw no hope. I saw nothing. I saw just an abyss. And my life was a continual cycle of cocaine, Xanax, and alcohol. I had lost all my clients. I really didn't have any way of supporting myself. And here's where enormous privilege comes in. And I would be disingenuous not to acknowledge the enormous privilege I've had in life because of my brothers and financial and a lot of, skin color and all types of different privilege. My brother was supporting me. Mark was supporting me because he didn't want to see me living under a bridge. But that, money doesn't make you happy. Money, if you're happy, money can increase that happiness and things like that. But if money does not make you happy in itself. And so I just decided I was a black stain on the Cuban name, that I had nothing to offer anyone in life, and I decided to end my life. I sent a disturbing email to a friend who got a hold of both of my brothers. Jeff came first to my house. Mark flew in from LA. Jeff came up to my bedroom, and I'm lying in bed. And I had a .45 automatic on my nightstand. There was cocaine everywhere. There was alcohol, bottles spread out. Jeff picked up the gun, took the gun, and Mark showed up. They cleaned up, and they dragged me kicking and screaming in my first 2 trips to a Dallas psychiatric facility. That's how close it was.
Did they save your life?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. But the interesting thing is that even after that, I literally was kicking and screaming. They had to hold me in that car in the back seat. While they saved my life, all I wanted them was to get out of my life. I wasn't ready. I was not ready. And that's the thing about addiction, whether it's alcohol or drugs. I had to be ready on my own. No one could make me ready. People can lay the path, but if I wasn't ready, and I've gone through this trying to help other people, right? You can talk, you can say, we can get you into this treatment center, we can do this, we can get you in a 12-step, but if they don't want it, you can't force them into it unless maybe they're a minor and you're a parent. But that, forced treatment has its issues too. So they take me down there, and we're sitting in the room with the psychiatrist, the psychiatric nurse, and my 2 brothers. And I'm screaming and blaming them, pointing my finger at them, blaming Mark, saying, this is all you don't know what it's like. You're famous, blah, blah, blah. Blaming everyone but myself, not taking responsibility for my own sense of self. And they just took it and they sat there. And it also occurred to me that I'm a lawyer, they were trying to put a psychiatric hold on me. And I wasn't going to let that happen. So my mind's starting to cycle through what are the laws in Texas? Well, I'm talking.
Wow.
And so I shift my tone. Okay, I'm not a danger to myself. I'm not a danger to others, blah, 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 and said the things I needed to say. So the doctor, the psychiatrist had to say to Mark and Jeff, I can't sign off on it, right? He is my patient, not, I can't sign off on it. And so much to their chagrin, they couldn't put a hold on me. So we did what I call the Cuban rehab. They took me back to my house, they took my car keys, said, stay in your house for 2 weeks, sober up, and it'll all be okay. And that's not
And coming up next, right here on the Heart of Innovation, we're going to hear the rest of the story. Ooh, I love a cliffhanger. Stay with us right here on the Heart of Innovation. Don't go away. More with Mark Cuban. Brian Cuban.
Happens all the time.
I've never done that before. Wow.
You're forgiven.
Welcome back, everybody. Before we went to break, Brian, you were going to explain the Cuban method of rehab. It sounded pretty dramatic, and did it work?
No. Their method was to take my car keys and, for me to seclude in my house for 2 weeks and dry out, right? That's not how addiction works. But my family was trying to learn like anyone else. They didn't know. And to show you how resistant I was and how not ready I was, the moment they were gone, I got in a cab to a car dealership and got a new set of car keys. They weren't going to tell me what to do. And so what did I learn from that? What could I have learned from that? Well, I didn't say I'm going to residential treatment, rehab. I didn't say I'm going to 12-step. And for those who don't know, AA is the most well-known, but there are others. And it was none of those things. It was, I'm just going to bring the party to me. I had a drug dealer who delivered, and I'm going to distance from my family, right? Because now they know, now it's in their face. And that's what I did. And that went on until really uh, Easter weekend 2007 when I hate the term rock bottom. I just hate it. I hit my recovery tipping point after a 2.5 day alcohol and drug induced blackout, where my girlfriend at the time, now wife, uh, came home from a vacation. She had just moved in with me, came home from seeing her family out of town. And I had gone out that Friday when she left thinking I'd go out, have a good time and shower and be all, she'd never know. I was a liar, liar, liar. That's what I did in addiction is lie. I had a JD in law, but I had a PhD in lying. And, but I blacked out and I had a 2-day blackout. Next thing I know, it's Sunday evening. She's looking down at me. I look around. There's drugs everywhere. She didn't know anything about any of it. There's alcohol. And she's probably wondering if she walked in the right house. I'm trying to figure out what lie I can tell to explain this Law and Order episode orgy of evidence that I just might not be the person I represented myself to be.
Yeah.
And all I could think of was kind of a metaphorical running home to mama. I said, take me back to blank, and I named the psychiatric facility. You've been to a psychiatric facility? We'll talk about that later. I just need more time to think of a good lie to explain what there was only one explanation for. And that is how that went.
So you actively knew you were, I guess in your mind, did it register that you were doing something wrong? I read a part in your book when, was in 2006, the Mavericks were going into the
Yeah.
championship, and you had some tickets that
Oh,
you were
yeah,
maybe
yeah,
saw
yeah.
on eBay,
That's the
but
insanity
didn't.
of addiction. Do we have time for that story?
Of course.
That's the insanity of addiction. So in 2006, the Mavericks were going to the NBA championship for the very first time. And my brother bought the team in 2000, and we had had some success, but this was our first trip to the championship. We ended up losing. But as you might guess, I'm going to get some good seats, right? My brother owns the team. And so I called him up. I got 2 tickets. And then I also got a couple of tickets. I told him were for friends. You think I gave them to those friends? Nah. You're probably thinking I sold them on eBay for some astronomical amount. Thinking like a lawyer. I didn't do that either because that would have been disrespectful to Mark, to me, to myself. I took those 2 tickets and traded them to my cocaine dealer for $1,000 in cocaine. Selling them on eBay was disrespectful, but selling to my cocaine dealer was perfectly acceptable, right? How the mind works in addiction. My dealer shows up. I was high class. He delivered. I give him the tickets. He gives me this giant baggie of cocaine. I run up to my home office. I line it all out. I roll up a dollar bill. And cocaine users were kind of an ironic bunch, especially in pandemic times and coming out of a pandemic. You'll wash your hand, use the Purell, but we'll stick a dollar bill up our nose that has God knows what on it. And
Yeah.
it's used by God knows who and sniff.
Yeah.
Go figure.
My goodness.
Cocaine had long stopped giving me the feeling of self-love and self-acceptance,
Yeah.
just pain and shame and paranoia. I got all paranoid. I hid the cocaine. I drove to a home improvement store where I bought electrical faceplate outlets, a drill, and a saw. I drove back to my house, go to the drywall in the closets upstairs with the saw and the drill, and I create these fake electrical outlets. And I put the cocaine in smaller baggies and put it behind all these fake electrical outlets and sealed it with the faceplate, thinking I'm the smartest lawyer ever. Like the DEA, the cops, and the drug dogs have never thought of that one before. And so I did a little, I snorted a little more, and again, just bad highs and paranoia. And it was never an epiphany that I might have a problem. It was maybe I need to change drug dealers. Maybe I need to switch out the Grey Goose for the Jack Daniels and get that right mixture. And so I hid the cocaine. I took the cocaine out of the hiding place because I was all paranoid again. And I went and I flushed it all down the toilet about an hour later. Now it's about $900 worth of cocaine. I wake up the next morning and I'm thinking, what? Wait a minute. You flushed all your stash down the toilet. There's another game tonight. You're an idiot. So I called up Mark. I got 2 more tickets. I called up my dealer again, rinse, wash, repeat. He comes to my house and he said, you did all that last night? I didn't want to tell him I flushed it down the toilet like a moron. I said, yes, give it all. And he gives it to me. And then I did the same thing. I tried it. bad high. I was just chasing this high that was never going to come again. And which is very common in cocaine addiction. And I hide the cocaine again. This time, about 2 hours later, I take it back out and I go back to that same bathroom and I flush it down the toilet for the second night in a row. Now, they say when Dallas flushes, it swirls downhill to Houston. So I think some people from Houston had a little hop on their steps those 2 nights. The quote unquote insanity of addiction, doing the same thing over and over the same way and expecting a result. But we know it's not insane. It's a biological, brain-based process that affects so many of us, our loved ones, ourselves, our children, our spouses, our colleagues. I mean, we've lost over, with the fentanyl fatal overdose epidemic, we've lost hundreds of thousands of kids. We're losing a generation.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because, you mentioned a lot about self-love and self-awareness and a person having to be ready. And I know that Dr. John experiences this as much as I do on a daily basis when we're having to help patients who have these vascular disorders or cardiovascular disorders to change their addictions, to change their habits before. And you can lead that horse to water in a sense, but you can't make them drink, right?
It's hard, Kim.
And I'm curious, what was that point for you? What was that for you, that catalyst for you, where you finally said, you know what, I'm ready?
That's a great question.
You use that to help others to find their moment as well.
That moment, what I call my recovery tipping point, was standing in that parking lot of the psychiatric facility for the second time in my life with Amanda and my girlfriend at the time, now wife, standing there, and she's crying. And, 3 things occurred to me. One, she was going to leave, and she didn't. She stood by me, and we dated for over a decade while I rebuilt the broken trust and found recovery. And now we've been together over 18 years. And 2, there wouldn't be a third trip back. I'd be dead. And 3, Kim, I thought about something my father would say to Mark, Jeff, and I growing up all the time. My father would say, guys, no matter what happens in life, no matter where you go, pick up that phone and call your brother. Tell your brother you love him. Ask your brother if there's anything you can do. My father was the middle of 3 boys like me. This was the gift that was passed down from their parents. And, they were very close. And he was passing down this gift of family, this gift of love. And that is a privilege as well, because especially around addiction, you have broken families, estranged families, you have incarceration, you have all of these things that, explode the nuclear family unit. And I realized that it was a privilege and I didn't want to lose my family. And I decided it was time.
And I've noticed
right here on the Heart of Innovation, we're going to hear what John's question is for Brian. So you don't want to miss that. Stay with us. Don't go away.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're continuing our conversation with Brian Cuban. And before we went to break, he was sharing how important the family is, and not only just in general, but it sounds like his family and his now wife, girlfriend at the time, saved his life. So, Brian, as we were talking, in my head, I was writing notes, and I said his family never gave up on him. Did you ever give up on your family, or did you ever give up on yourself?
I never gave up on my family. I was ashamed. I distanced from my family. That wasn't giving up. I distanced because I was ashamed. Mm-hmm. And giving up on myself, I didn't know who I was, right? I had to break down Brian Cuban to that little boy who was bullied, physically assaulted over his weight, and all of this different trauma in my life. And I had to heal that little boy before I could figure out who Brian Cuban was sober. Mm-hmm. And you know what? When I decided I was going to go to 12-step, my family never gave up on me, but they knew it. They figured out that I had to do it. There was nothing they can do. All the money in the world can't get someone sober, right? And so when I decided I was going to go to 12-step, I texted Mark, and I texted Jeff and said, I'm going to 12-step. I'm 12-step meeting today. All I got back were one-word answers from each of them. Good. They knew, right? There was nothing else to say. And when I finished the meeting, I texted them, my first one down. They said, we're proud of you. That was it. That was all there was to say, because they couldn't do it. And when I sat in that chair in my first 12-step meeting, I was crying and I was ashamed. And I didn't know what my future would look like. I was terrified. You know what I wanted more than anything else when I sat down for my first time? I remember specifically thinking that if sitting in this chair will allow me, for the first time in my life, to wake up, walk to the bathroom, birthday suit naked, look at myself, and love myself without alcohol or cocaine, I would sit in that chair. And I sat and, I still sit. And I hit 17 years in recovery, April 8th of this year.
Amazing.
And Douglas has a question from Lumberton, Texas. Douglas, go ahead and ask your question for Brian Cuban.
Yes, sir. Are you still involved in meetings and sponsored?
Yes.
And
Yeah, I still go to 12-step meetings, and I do a lot of, during the pandemic, I really got into the virtual ones online. So I do those, and I still work with people, and I mentor people, boys and girls struggling with eating disorders and addiction. A lot of lawyers, just because it's important. Connection. And when I work with people, that helps me. That really helps me. So yes, I am still.
I'd like to call another caller, Marcia Burr. Go ahead and ask your question.
Thanks, Brian. It's always very heartening to me to hear another good recovery story. And I have so many thoughts swirling around my head. Can you tell me a little bit more about your experience with 12-step? My
Sure.
experience with it was like it was steps that I had to take, as you said. You can open the door, but you can't force a person
Absolutely. And I
through
think
it.
it's important to note that there are many paths to recovery. Thank you. That's a great question. There are many paths to recovery, and I chose 12. I was only given two options when I got sober, either treatment or 12-step. But there are many different paths to recovery now. There's smart recovery in many different ways. But for me, moving away from talking specifics about the big book and all those things, the connection in the room. I mean, I was going to 3 meetings a day, and it's something that I actually cut a video on not too long ago. It's going from FOMO to JOMO, the fear of missing out to the joy of missing out. When I first got sober, I was awash in the fear of missing out, right? Because I felt totally alone. And what got me through that were the connections in the rooms. I was going to 3 meetings a day. So because even though, you delete your dealer's number, you trash all your beer bottles and all that, you know where the liquor store is. My dealer's number's in my head. And so that fear of missing out is always, especially early in recovery, early in sobriety, there's always that danger of being pulled back because you feel like you'll never experience joy again, a joy of a sober joy, where you do things and you don't know what those activities are. And so you only know for me, I'll just speak for me, I only knew one way of life, which was partying. And so that was very important to me, the connections in the rooms.
I want to talk about your writing and the role that it's played in your therapy, and moving from defining yourself by your story to defining yourself by the news story that you're creating with so much success with creating fiction.
Well, that was an interesting journey. My first 2 books were about me, that were memoirs, eating disorders and addiction. Mm-hmm. And then it's funny, I had a dream one night, and the dream just kept solidifying in my head. And it just occurred to me, wow, this is a good plot. And I just decided that I was going to write fiction and write my first novel. And it took me years because I knew how to write nonfiction, but fiction is a completely different art. And it took me a long time to learn how to do it properly. And The Ambulance Chaser, I was very proud of. And both these books are set in Pittsburgh because that's where I'm from. And, and I know the town. Maybe one day I'll set one in Dallas. But they both revolve around addiction, and The Body Brokers revolves around the fentanyl epidemic. And yes, there are aspects of me in these books, but it really has been just mind freeing to create characters, to create storylines, to not know what's going to happen when I start a book, how it's going to end. I don't know. And there's a thrill to that. And there's a thrill to pushing a story forward where I may not even know how the next chapter is going to go. I've really enjoyed it.
That's really interesting. So I've never written a book. I always assumed that like one of the 7 habits of highly effective people begin with the end in mind, but you don't have an end for the book? Or do you
No,
have,
I don't. I didn't have an end for the body brokers until I was maybe halfway through.
really?
I had an idea of how it was going to end, but no. And some people outline their whole book, right?
Mhm.
My mind just doesn't work best that way. But yeah, I enjoy the process of not necessarily knowing how conflict is going to work out, and what's going to happen to a certain character.
And what is your inspiration for these books and for the themes and the characters?
Uh, my knowledge of the recovery space. Because I stay very in tune in the recovery space. I am very involved with the, raising awareness and battling misinformation regarding fentanyl and the fatal overdose epidemic. And so I take all of that and I created a story of a person who finds his girlfriend dead of a fentanyl epidemic, and they're both in recovery. And he and her toxicologist roommate go on a journey to prove that she was actually murdered.
Wow. So these are loosely based on truth.
The second book, The Body Brokers, is definitely ripped from the headlines type thing.
Wow. I can't wait to read the book, but I also
Yeah,
can't wait
yeah,
to see
and
the
I
movie,
unfortunately
hopefully.
I've been able to draw on my knowledge, and that I certainly know I'm not a toxicologist. We have a doctor here, but I do consider myself. I'm not a doctor, but I do consider myself informed. I read what toxicologists write. I read about whether you can actually overdose from passive fentanyl exposure by just being in the room. And, the doctor probably has some thoughts on that, but for another time. So I read about all these things and understand how the science actually works, the biology actually works, and that helps me create my storylines. And in the story journeys from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to ground zero of the fentanyl epidemic, Kensington, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Fantastic. Well, coming up right here on the Heart of Innovation, we'll have some final thoughts from Brian Cuban and get some additional tips on building resilience so you can live better quality of life. So stay with us.
Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Wrapping up a fantastic show with Brian Cuban. So, again, with 4 minutes left, Brian, what are some tips and tricks for resilience? During the break, you mentioned it has something to do with your tips for singing.
That's right. I've been taking singing lessons for going on 2 years now, which is part of my journey to dealing with allowing myself to deal with vulnerability and allowing myself to be more vulnerable. But what I've learned from the singing process is that it is hard and there is failure, and your voice builds resilience like you can build resilience in yourself. The voice has to become more resilient over time. And one of the things my vocal coach pounds into me all the time is that you have to let your voice fail. You have to challenge the limits of your voice. Your voice is going to crack, your voice is going to screech. Otherwise, you become comfortable, stuck in the same place, and you never know what you're capable of. When I go on LinkedIn, Kim, and I see all the time, I just cringe. I see, the 7 habits of mentally strong people, right? These articles make me cringe, because does that mean if you don't do that, does that mean you're mentally weak? Right?
Mm-hmm.
There is no such thing in my mind as mentally strong or mentally weak. There are only different levels of resilience. And people can become more resilient. And to do that, you have to, figure out where your weaknesses are and push it, and allow yourself to approach failure and figure out what you've learned from that. That's where resilience comes in. What did I learn? How can I implement that moving forward to take myself up to the next level, right? How am I going to hit that C5? Well, I have to fail at C5 and understand what I did wrong. And that's a singing, Kim understands, right? C5 on the scale is hard, especially for a baritone like me. So you have to understand, you have to hit it and fail. You have to understand why you failed, and you have to take a step back and build that base, and just incrementally move back up to it. That's resilience.
I love it. And so in our last minute here, we would just really appreciate your time, Brian. Everyone needs to go out, get to Amazon and pre-order The Body Brokers.
Yes, The Body Brokers is available for pre-orders. And while you won't get it till December, just pre-orders help me a lot, right? Because that's how they determine best-selling list. And with Amazon pre-orders, if the price drops, your price will drop with it.
And make sure, along with ordering that, in the meantime, if you haven't read The Ambulance Chaser, that is a fantastic book. In fact, I mean, I'm going to take it and I'm going to read it again because I absolutely loved it. My dad has already read it twice, and he said that there were quite a few things that he wished he caught the first time, but now he's read it a second time and he's caught those little details. It's very, very detailed. You did a great job with it.
Thank you. And you can also go to authorbriancuban.com and enter your contact information. And it's just for my book stuff and stay up to date on my speaking tours, my release, and things like that.
Real quick, Brian, do you practice law anymore?
I have not practiced law. I'm close to 20 years now.
I see.
And I do not miss it.
I was going to say, do you miss it?
Nope. Amazingly, I still have my law license, but it wasn't for lack of trying to lose it.
On that note, thank
Well
you
done.
so much,
Well
Brian,
done.
for joining us. We really appreciate you, and congratulations on all of your success.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.